Okay, everyone, 2019 NBA Draft, less than 24 hours away. It's time for the mock draft. We had another trade today with Mike Conley getting sent to the Utah Jazz. So we have a little bit of an update there. Had to make a few changes to the draft board. But we'll take that into consideration and we'll go from there. Hopefully you like this video. If you can, please subscribe. I'm going to try to do more NBA videos like this, but I want to check and see if you guys agree with me, if you disagree with me, if you like some things, if you don't like some things, let me know. Obviously, I'll try to make improvements along the way. So, with that being said, let's get underway. Number one, we all know what's happening here at number one. It's going to be Zion Williamson. He's going to take over for Anthony Davis and start a new era in New Orleans. That's the easy one. Number two, let's head to the Memphis Grizzlies. The fact that they traded Mike Conley clears up any doubt who their draft pick might be tomorrow night. Obviously, they've been projected to take John Morant, but there were some people that said maybe RJ Barrett. It's going to be John Morant. Now that Mike Conley's gone, it makes perfect sense. We'll move right on to number three. So number three, the Knicks. Unfortunately, things aren't panning out the way the Knicks hoped that they would this summer. They had hopes to sign two max contracts, hopefully in Durant and Kyrie, or Durant and somebody else. But the fact that Durant got hurt, I think that's going to put a bit of a dent into their plans. So they need a new franchise cornerstone, and RJ Barrett is the next best name on the list. So it makes sense for him to go to New York. And we'll move on to number four. I know a lot of people mentioned Darius Garland as a potential pick here, but I think there's more question marks around Darius Garland, not to mention the injury that he had all of last year. So RJ Barrett it is. Number four. Here's where things start getting spicy here. I project a trade to happen at number four. New Orleans owns this pick thanks to the Anthony Davis trade. However, they've been talking about how they're going to trade this pick. Now, all the other mock drafts that you see out there say that they'll trade it to the Hawks for 8 and 10. That's boring. I wanted to try something different. Another franchise that's kind of at a crossroads is the Houston Rockets. They've been talking about trying to trade Chris Paul. They've been trying to trade Clint Capela. Because as we saw at the end of the season in the playoffs, Clint Capela, he wasn't spending crucial time on the floor when the game was coming down to the wire. Clint Capela is on the bench. So Houston, I think, in an effort to become more competitive with the modern NBA, is going to trade Clint Capela here, along with some salary fillers in Frazier, Chiozza, and Gary Clark. They're going to trade all four of those players to New Orleans for this pick, E'Twaun Moore, and Solomon Hill. Now, this makes sense for the Rockets because they get E'Twaun Moore, who's essentially a poor man's version of Eric Gordon. They get Solomon Hill, who's essentially a poor man's version of PJ Tucker. So they're doubling down on those role players, that depth that they have there. In addition, they get a young defensive player that can step in right now and help that team, in DeAndre Hunter. So that they have another building block going forward. If things crumble next year, at least they have a cornerstone to continue building around. along with likely James Harden. The only downside to this trade is it leaves Houston with essentially no center. You've got, who else do they have on their bench here? I believe they have Nene, who is on a player option. They have Isaiah Hartenstein, who had some promising moments in the G League last year. And they also picked up Deonta Davis from Atlanta via waivers, I think last week. So they at least have a few bodies, but the assumption there, if they made this trade, is they would go find a veteran, you know, somebody like maybe Robin Lopez, or, you know, there's a lot of older guys out there that can fill time at the center spot. Look at Andrew Bogut on the Warriors, you know. Granted, he's not a superior player or anything, but he gave him valuable minutes at the center spot. So, but the Rockets of last year, how many minutes did PJ Tucker spend at center last year? And they survived. So, the way the game is going, it's not necessarily a necessity to have a premier player at the center spot. So they roll with Hunter here and hope they can sign a veteran. It's a ballsy move, but they got to do something. They've struck out now 3 years in a row. So that's number 4 to the Rockets. Number 5, the Cavs. Jarrett Culver is a consideration here, but I think the Cavs, they got to shoot for the moon. They got to take the next best star quality player, and that's Darius Garland. Now you might have some overlap, the fact that he and Colin Sexton will both be that point guard type player, but you know, I think Darius Garland has a lot of similarities to C.J. McCollum. Look at C.J. McCollum in Portland. He's their 2. He shouldn't necessarily be a 2, but Sexton and Garland can kind of supplement each other to that extent. Sexton's more of your driver slasher, Garland's more of your shooter. So at this point, Cleveland has time to figure it out. They're not competing for a championship next year. They can take Garland, see what he turns out to be, and make moves next year if they need to. Number 6, Phoenix. A similar situation here. Phoenix obviously needs a point guard. Kobe White played point guard for North Carolina. They project him to be more of a shooting guard or a ball dominant guard in the NBA. So in that regard, he clashes with Devin Booker. But same thing here. Booker's more of a shooter. Kobe White's more of a slasher. They could supplement each other really well in Phoenix. And realistically, at the number 6 spot, unless Phoenix makes a trade with somebody, there's not really much else that's going to help them more here, more than Kobe White would. So it makes the most sense for them. This would be another pick, though, that I'd be interested in projecting a trade. I just couldn't seem to find any partners that made sense for this pick. That pushes us out to number 7. I have another trade here. This is Chicago's pick. But at this point, Chicago also wants a point guard. Now, the next 2 best players on the board are Jarrett Culver and Cam Reddish, in my mind, or what I think would be on the Bulls' board. And if that's the case, I think all along Atlanta, all the rumors have been they're trying to trade the 8 and 10 to move up to the 4 to draft Jarrett Culver. Well, here he still sits at 7. So I think Atlanta offers Chicago their number 35 pick in the second round, along with their number 8 to move up the 1 spot. And I think Chicago takes that deal because I don't think one sticks out more than the other to Chicago. So if you can get another top 35 pick out of the deal, You take it, you can add another young player to your team, and take whoever's left. So that being said, Atlanta at number 7 takes Jarrett Culver. That brings us to number 8. Chicago will take what's left in Cam Reddish. Not a bad consolation prize. Cam Reddish, I totally buy the fact that he has one of the highest potentials in this class. It's unfortunate, his situation at Duke, him being the third fiddle. I think what a lot of people don't recognize is when you change levels of competition like that, you know, in high school, Cam Reddish was the number 1 guy. And for you to go from the number 1 guy to all of a sudden the third or fourth guy, that's hard because you don't, you know, you're not necessarily taking the shots you want to take. You might be stuck with sitting on the perimeter and waiting for the open shot. The game flows differently depending on how much of a go-to player you are, I guess is the best way to say it. So I think Cam Reddish can explode and turn into that Paul George type of a player. I'll buy that comparison. And that's a risk worth taking for the Bulls. Number 9, the Wizards. The Wizards are a really tough team to project. I mean, the only sure thing on that team is Bradley Beal, and even him, he's in trade rumors all over the place. I don't know if you're the Wizards. I don't know if you wait around for John Wall. I don't know if you try to trade John Wall and try to rebuild right away. In terms of the rest of the team, you have a couple pieces. You have Thomas Bryant that's played well as your center, but you got to keep in mind, I don't know how expensive all these guys are going to be to bring back. Dwight Howard is on contract. You would assume he's going to be no part of that team. You have Jeff Green and Trevor Ariza as free agents. I don't know that you can afford either one of them, being that there's not a lot of money to go around. You would assume you're going to decline the Jabari Parker team option. You would assume they're going to try to re-sign Bobby Portis, but he's another player. He's streaky. He might make a lot more than Washington's willing to spend on him. Because they have the same question there. Is he reliable to be a starting power forward or center in the league? I don't know that he is. So, that being said, the player that made the most sense here is Brandon Clark. They question if he's a 3 or 4. I see him as a power forward in the NBA. He'll be a strong defender, a strong athletic body in the post to put next to Thomas Bryant. I just think he gives you the best chance because he's old enough where if they want to compete now, you know, he can give them solid minutes as a rookie. But if they want to rebuild, he's young enough that he can still be a player that they can rebuild around to go the direction of Bradley Beal and Brandon Clark as their two main cornerstones. On to number 10, the Hawks. I have them taking Goga Batadze here. In my mind, he is the best center in this draft. I did hear a comparison out there that compared him to Jokic, a poor man's Jokic. I could see that. He has a tough mindset. He's an all-around good player. He's a good shooter. He's a good passer. He's one of the rookies that I'm most excited about, most excited to see. And he would round out that starting 5 for the Hawks. They'd have Trae Young at the 1. Now with pick 7, they'd have Jarrett Culver at the 2, Kevin Huerter at the 3, John Collins at the 4, and now Goga at the 5. They have a rock-solid starting five for those guys to all grow together over the next 2-3 years, and they'll be a tough team. Number 11, Minnesota. I've seen a lot of rumors out there that Minnesota promised Rui Hachimura here. I don't buy that. I don't see how it makes sense for Minnesota. They have Dario at the 4. They have a decision to make on Taj Gibson if they want to bring him back. And frankly, that Minnesota team need a punch of something. So Nasir Little, in my mind, is the biggest high risk, high reward pick. He could be a flop, or he could be potentially the best player in this draft. That's the kick that team needs, because for the last 3 years now, Minnesota's been sitting on the brink of being a playoff team. And if they don't figure something out soon, they're going to be stuck in a position where they're going to have to break that team up. Nasir Little hopefully is the guy that pushes them over the top. Okay, on to number 12. I've got another trade here at number 12. This is Charlotte's pick. Charlotte is another team, similar to Washington. They're in a terrible financial situation, and everything is kind of teetering on Kemba Walker. Whether they bring him back, whether they let him go. If it were my team, I'd let Kemba Walker go and start to rebuild. Because if they keep Kemba Walker, they're financially screwed for the next 3 years. But if they want to try to compete this year and they want to bring Kemba back, then they need to trade this number 12 pick. So in this situation, because I knowing the Hornets and knowing Michael Jordan, they're going to re-sign Kemba. So if that's the case, they should trade this number 12 pick along with Bismack Biyombo and Michael Kidd-Gilchrist to the Cavs for Kevin Love. Now it pushes their financial situation out even further, but you're spending $28 million on an all-star caliber player instead of Bismack Biyombo and Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, who can hardly get off the bench. Cleveland, it makes sense for them because they can get another top prospect, all while taking 2 players that will come off of their deals next summer, which works well for them because like 3/4 of the Cavs team is all players that expire this coming off season. They'll have, let's see here, Tristan Thompson, Jordan Clarkson, Brandon Knight, Dellavedova, J.R. Smith, John Henson. All those guys come off contract the next offseason. So Biyombo and Kidd-Gilchrist would join them there. And at that point, I think Cleveland would have like $80 million in cap space in the summer of 2020, if that's the case. So it makes good sense for them. Plus, it gives them the option here to draft Jackson Hayes. That would give them their center of the future to pair with Colin Sexton and Darius Garland at the 1 and 2. Then you have Chetty Osman at the 3 and Larry Nance at the 4. It's at least a reasonable team to move forward with. Okay. On to number 13. I have another trade here at 13. Miami is another team in terrible financial situation. So in this situation, I have them with Memphis making the trade, the Mike Conley trade. They opened up an extra 15 or 16 million in cap space, in addition to the 20 plus they already had. So in this situation, I have Miami sending this number 13 pick along with Ryan Anderson, who I think his salary is like 21 million, to Memphis for a highly protected second-round pick. So essentially Memphis is giving Miami nothing. Miami's dumping Ryan Anderson along with the number 13th pick as the cost. That would allow Miami to drop a good 20 million below the luxury tax line, which opens up the possibility for them to sign a player to the mid-level exception. I think is 9.2 or 10.2 million or something like that this year. So in the end, we all know Miami needed to make an addition to contend. Well, now they have that mid-level exception to make an addition. That's going to be better for them than a draft pick would. That being said, with the number 13 pick, the Memphis Grizzlies are going to take Romeo Langford. They're banking on the fact that he had that injured thumb. That's what held him back last year. He can become a go-to shooting guard to put next to Ja Morant at the 1. And then at the 3 they have Kyle Anderson and they have Dylan Brooks, a couple other guys to build around, and Jaren Jackson at the 4, and then they have a decision to make on Valanciunas at the 5. So that gives them a reasonable starting 5 to move forward with. Number 14. Boston. Okay, Boston, being that Kyrie Irving opted out and now Al Horford also opted out, I think Boston's going to try to move forward. I looked around for trades that they could do with these picks to try to get some veteran players to come in and make another run. Because I really don't feel like they're that far off with Tatum and Jaylen Brown and Marcus Smart, assuming they sign Rozier. I mean, that's pretty much the team that they went to the Eastern Conference Finals with the previous year, right? So I don't know. You know, they're not in that bad of a shape, but the fact that they have 3 first-round picks, I think they take the chance on Sekou Doumbouya here. And hope that he can turn into a superstar that they can move forward with. It's kind of scary to think if he's a solid defender and can become a star, to have him and Tatum at your forward spots. Scary combination. And worth the risk for them, being that they have 3 picks. 15. I've seen this projection quite a few times, Kevin Porter Jr. to the Detroit Pistons. It makes total sense. They have no playmaker outside of Blake Griffin. They have Luke Kennard as a 2 right now, but we know Luke Kennard, he's a shooter, and that's about it. The Pistons need a wing. They need a playmaking wing. Kevin Porter has all the potential in the world to be a go-to scorer. And I think it's all going to depend on what kind of team he goes to. Luckily for him, I think this is the best situation for him, because they can plug him right in and have him be the go-to player immediately. And I think if he goes to Detroit, I think he will blow up. I think he potentially could be a Rookie of the Year candidate. Okay, 16, the Orlando Magic. I've seen a lot of mock drafts having the Magic take Tyler Hero here. I like that pick a lot because it gives them a shooter. However, I know Orlando, and I know that management's tendency, and they always look for length. If you look at their draft picks, and Jonathan Isaac and Mohamed Bamba, they're looking for longer guys to match that to match the length that they already have. Nickeil Alexander-Walker makes sense here. He's a tall guard. He can play point guard or shooting guard. It gives them an option if they want to transition. If Fultz doesn't work out, if they want to transition from Augustin to Alexander-Walker as the point guard, or he can take over at the 2 guard as they fade Fournier out. So I think that makes the most sense. It was tempting to go with Bol here, just because he's the definition of length. But the fact that they already have Isaac at the 3 and 4, and then Gordon at the 4, and then Bamba at the 5. We've seen Orlando take too many centers, big men, year after year. So I think they finally need to break away from that. So, Nickeil Alexander-Walker it is. 17, the Hawks. This one I had a hard time with because I don't think Bol fits that team very well. But same thing here. The fact that they had 3 picks, this is the 3rd one. Bol does have star potential, or that's what people think. You know, a lot of people compare him to Porzingis because he can hit a 3-point shot. I think that's a little overblown. I just don't see that happening unless he's the focal point of your team. I don't see him scoring. I think he'll be a solid spot up 3-point shooter. But that's probably it in my mind. But for Atlanta, the 3rd first-round pick, it's worth a shot. What the heck? Go for it. If he turns into a superstar, hey, you got him at number 17. That's a steal. 18, the Pacers. I think they go with Keldon Johnson here. He's that wing. You know, could fill the role of Bogdanovich if he leaves in free agency. He's got some work to do, but he's a solid defender. I think that makes good sense for Indiana at 18. 19, the Spurs. Matisse Thybulle makes too much sense for the Spurs. I feel like his defensive awareness, old Coach Pop is going to fall in love with that. And, Coach Pop, in his mind, he can develop Thybulle's offensive game. So it makes perfect sense for them. Plus, they don't really have wings on that team. Beyond DeRozan, I mean, do they really have a small forward on that team? I guess you could call Rudy Gay a small forward, supposedly, but Thybulle fills a hole, and he makes perfect sense for the Spurs. Okay, number 20. Now we finally see Tyler Hero come off the board. I have high hopes for Tyler Hero, but I think it all depends on what team he's on. It's going to be unfortunate if they pigeonhole him into a shooter, the title of a shooter, where he turns into like Kyle Korver, where that's all he is, a 3-point shooter, because I think he could be much more than that. The fact that he came into Kentucky and did what he did last year as a freshman, that's amazing. I think his potential is off the charts, but he doesn't measure well, so that's why he's down as low as he is. I think he's going to prove a lot of people wrong in the next couple of years. So Boston makes perfect sense for them to grab him. He can be their shooter off the bench for now and develop into more. 21, Oklahoma City. I think Oklahoma City tries to shop this pick hard and maybe try to dump Dennis Schroeder's contract because they're way over the tax threshold, and they keep not winning, so they have to do something at some point. That being said, I don't see that. I don't see any trades that make sense for them, or for other teams, more importantly. So in this situation, I have them taking P.J. Washington. I think he can take the place of Patrick Patterson as the power forward that can shoot threes off the bench, and I think he'll be better than Patrick Patterson. So It's a good pick for them. It gives them a solid role player to move forward with, and hopefully he can help them out. Help them to push a little further in the playoffs. Okay, 22, Boston again. Keeping with the theme of rebuilding, Boston, they've got Robert Williams on their team as a center, assuming Horford doesn't come back, which is what everybody's making it sound like. Cavanjali here can come in, potentially start for that Boston team at center this year, if they're unable to sign anyone to come in and start. But I think that gives them good potential to get somewhat of a poor man's version of Al Horford. He's a tough player. He can shoot. It gives them some good potential there to round out their first round. The fact that they walk out of draft night with Sekou Doumbouya, one of the guys with the highest ceilings in the draft, to go with Tyler Hero and Cavanjali. I think they're in good shape for the future. If they re-sign Rozier, you've got Rozier to go with Brown, Tatum, Hayward, along with these three rookies, and Marcus Smart. That's a reasonable core to keep building with. Pick 23. This is the pick that Memphis just acquired today. I think they take Bruno Fernando here. It gives them an option as a tough rebounding center. You look at their 4 spot, they have Jaren Jackson, who's got crazy potential, but not the strongest of rebounders. So Fernando would make up for that deficit here. It gives them a backup option in case things don't work out with Valanciunas. So Bruno, tough to spend a first-round pick on him because he's kind of got that big center body, the body that the NBA is transitioning away from. But I think he's a valuable role player for them down the stretch here. 24, the 76ers. I think the 76ers really wanted some wing depth with their first rounder here. But at the same time, there have been whispers here and there about how, well, maybe Ben Simmons needs to play more forward. He needs to get out of the point guard role. They're going to have a hard time bringing T.J. McConnell back if they're going to re-sign Jimmy Butler and Tobias Harris and J.J. Redick. They only have so much money to go around. Now, if that's the case, if they want to move Simmons over, a couple different things could happen. Maybe they don't re-sign Tobias Harris. Maybe Simmons plays forward with Jimmy Butler. In that case, I think they bring T.J. McConnell back to play at the point. If not, maybe they keep Tobias Harris. They let T.J. McConnell go. Well, either way, you need a point guard in there somewhere. So Carson Edwards comes in. He can be that spark plug off the bench, potentially start for you. I don't know. I think he makes the most sense. There's not much else out there for point guards beyond maybe Ty Jerome, but I don't know really how he fits in Philadelphia. I think Carson Edwards makes a lot more sense as a bench spark plug scorer for them. 25, Portland. Portland has Al-Farouq Aminu, who's a free agent this year. It's going to be hard for them to defend paying him what they'd probably have to pay him to bring him back. I believe that they're a luxury tax team as well. Let me double check here. Portland. Okay, they're only a couple. If they re-sign Aminu, they would be into the tax. So I think it makes sense to let Aminu walk, and you sign Hachimura instead. Or you draft Hachimura instead. He can take that 4 spot. At 26, the Cavs. We have another Cavs draft pick here. I think this is where you take a chance on Darius Bazley. He can give you that, you know, this is similar to Portland last year taking Anthony Simmons. You know, he's the unknown guy, but loads of potential. So at this point, Cleveland, you got to lock up a couple of those guys. They've got Garland now. Who else did I have them draft? Jackson Hayes to go with Colin Sexton. You know, it just adds another prospect to the stable there. I think that makes a lot of sense for Cleveland to take a chance on Bazley here. 27, Brooklyn. You want a hard-nosed, tough power forward here. You've got Jared Allen at center. You add Nicholas Claxton at the 4. This also allows them the flexibility if they want to let go of Ed Davis, if they run into salary issues depending on who they end up going after with their max contract slots. This gives you a backup plan to add a big man that can play right now to help you out. He's been shooting up some of the mock draft boards. I don't know. He didn't make much sense anywhere else to me. I think 27 is still reasonable for him. I've seen him go higher, but we'll have to wait and see. I think he'll be there at 27 for Brooklyn. 28, the Warriors. I think Luka Samanic makes sense for them here. He can fill that Jonas Jerebko role, where, you know, I think he can contribute right now as a rookie. He's not going to be a flashy player, especially on Golden State, but they need some help there with Durant and Klay Thompson out next year, if they're even on the team. You know, they need some depth on that team. So I think it makes sense for them to go after one of the more NBA-ready players. I think Luka is it. 29, the Spurs again. Jonte Porter, in my mind, makes too much sense. He reminds me a lot of Tim Duncan in some ways. Obviously, he's not to the level a player that Tim Duncan is, but he's got that soft demeanor like Timmy Duncan did. I think Coach Popovich will coach him right up, and he'll be a solid NBA player. The question, obviously, is health with him. But if it turns out he's healthy, at 29, he is arguably the biggest steal of the draft. It gives them another option or a guy to even transition to as LaMarcus Aldridge ages and, you know, potentially walks away from the franchise. Jonte Porter could become their power forward center of the future. Pick 30, it's the Bucks. This is the last trade I have for the first round. The Bucks are going to do whatever they can here to get rid of Tony Snell's contract. So I have them trading this number 30 pick and a future second round pick to the Pelicans for a highly protected second rounder that, you know, one of the top 55 protected picks. So essentially they're giving up this first round pick and a future second to dump Tony Snell's contract. The Pelicans have that flexibility because of some of the trades that they've made. I think it allows them the same potential that I was just talking about with Cleveland taking Bazley. It allows them the same potential to lock Jalen Leck up for a full rookie contract to see what he's made of. See if they can turn him into an NBA superstar, or at the very least a starting point guard that they can rely on. It makes perfect sense to me for a rebuilding team like New Orleans to take on that contract to Snell when it's not really going to hurt them. They're not going to use money on incoming free agents in the next year or two. So use the money on Snell if it begs you an extra first-round pick to take a chance on a high-risk, high-reward guy like this. So that is the first round. Let's see here. We finished in 40 minutes. Not too bad. Please, again, let me know what you think. I'd love to do a second round, but that would take way too long. So we'll look forward to the NBA draft tomorrow. I can't wait. And we'll see you guys later. Happy drafting.